Why, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Innovantage Podcast, where business meets tech to bring you your competitive edge. As always, I am your host, Max, and today I am joined by Mr. Laimonas Sutkus, who is a fractional CTO and a recently hired engineering manager for, what's the company name? Remind me again.
It's a startup called Watergraph.
Watergraph. Thank you very much. So, Laimonas and I are going to be talking about what the hell even a fractional CTO is and what startups need to do in order to succeed in this competitive world, and maybe a little bit of his general experience in engineering and tech. So, Laimonas, welcome. Hi.
Yeah. Hi. So I would like to start with the fractional stuff, right? I would like to explain what the fractional executive even means.
That's a good place to start.
Yeah. When I started fractional career somewhere in the beginning of 2024, I didn't even know that the fractional role exists. Actually, I didn't even come up with that role. Actually, I was inspired by another fractional CTO who lives in Canada. And I just accidentally found his post on LinkedIn. And I saw his title, like fractional CTO, and I go, what is even fractional? What does it even mean? And I, started Googling around, looking what that role entails, and it actually very, very much resonated with me. And I thought, you know what? It makes sense. The role makes sense to me. Let's try it. I've never tried this before. I always had these full-time jobs. So why not try and do this and see whether it works or not? And this is how I started this fractional career. And the interesting thing is, like every role, every business has its upsides and downsides. And sure. I think it would be interesting for me to share the whole journey.
So we still haven't gotten to the fact of what the fractional CTO is. So as far as I understand, it's a part-time gig where specific companies can come to you as basically like a consultant to help them move their startups or their companies or their tech projects along, with you filling the role of the technical lead of that particular juncture. But
yeah, that's more or less true.
Okay. Yeah. So how has your experience been? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's easiest to explain a fractional CTO is to start with saying, start with thinking that it's some sort of consultant, but it is a hands-on consultant, right?
Okay.
And imagine it's a CTO that is always available, but it's not working for you for the whole 8 hours per day because it's simply not necessary, right? There is not enough work in your company. And probably that's why you don't have a CTO in the very first place. Like if you're a non-technical company, like a marketing agency, a small pharma company, an early stage startup, most likely you don't even need the CTO in the first place and you can do it most of the things yourself. But the guidance, right? The outside guidance of very common pitfalls or something like that, it's very much appreciated, and that's what fractional actually does. It works with you for, let's say, an hour or a couple hours per day, maybe even a couple of hours per week. Guides you through the unknowns, let's say, and doesn't allow you to make the casual mistakes. And then, fractional CTO, fractional CMO, fractional CFO, they're based on exactly the same business model. They allocate some amount of hours for you, and they do their best to guide your business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then, as a business person myself, the first question that comes to mind is, how do you ensure your business assets are secure? In the cases of startups, that's, the code base, the ideas, the competition, all of that stuff that companies cherish. And then you come in and, you get access to that. How do I know as an entrepreneur that you are not going to my competitors and just selling my information to them? Or how do I know that you are focused on me specifically and not on somebody else at the same time?
Yeah, I got some of the questions before, like
probably
exactly what you asked me.
Yeah.
Like some of my previous clients asked me specifically, like, in what industries I work. And once I told in what industries I have clients, then they specifically asked for very specific companies. Am I working with them? So just to avoid any, cross conflict possibilities. And there are basically two things. Well, I am very open in what I'm working with, and also the other thing is well, we have basic contracts, basic NDAs, basic agreements, and all this stuff to ensure security. So it's not rocket science, right? It's as simple as an NDA.
Yeah, true. And just beyond the NDA, you also have that relationship aspect that you mentioned, right? At the end of the day, if you trust your employees, why shouldn't you trust a fractional CTO or CMO or whoever, whatever role as well, right?
That's right.
Contracts only protect you so far. An employee will also have a contract, and if they want to do something malicious, they theoretically can.
They definitely can.
So it's not that you exist on a different plane of existence.
Yeah. However, there is this interesting philosophical shift between a fractional person and an in-house person. They still think and treat you as like an outsider, right? As a consultant that is not part of the team. And I think this is usually one of the mistakes that fractional executives face, and I face this myself, because the whole idea of being a fractional executive is being part of the team, working with the team on daily basis, having one-on-ones, reporting to the CEO, and etc. And I think this is, again, like one of the difficulties fractional executives face, right? This is a slight misunderstanding, like thinking that fractional role is a consultant role, which is not. It's you're just like an employee, but you're working on different basis, like different FTE, basically.
Okay,
that's the idea.
Okay, makes sense. But at the same time, you do have now, since very recently, an engineering management role in a particular company, and that is not a fractional role. That is
that's correct. That's a full-time job, and this is like how I decided in the early 2024 to try out the fractional career. After like 8 to 9 months, I decided that I don't particularly enjoy this, and I really want to go back to where I'm best at. And I'm best at dealing with engineering-based problems, and I really like, putting all my mind to it. Now, and I think this is where we can naturally lead to what are the advantages and disadvantages of
that's
being,
what I would have asked, yes.
of a fractional executive, right? So on the one side, you have all this like freedom to choose what you want to work with. You can have multiple clients. Also, there is some aspect of job security, because like if you are working with like let's say 3, 4, or 5 clients, if you lose a couple of them, you're still earning income from the rest of your clients, right?
True.
So you are becoming some sort of a one man's business, right? But that is also a disadvantage, that you are one man's business. Because what businesses do? They do sales, they do marketing, they do finances, they do everything that is standard, right?
Yeah.
And you as a fractional, you have to do a lot of sales, you have to do a lot of marketing. And what I found out, at least in my case, I would spend the majority of my time doing prospecting, lead generation, marketing, like a lot of posting on LinkedIn, then email outbounding, LinkedIn outbounding. And when you take all the hours that you work, right, for your clients and then all the other activities, then you see that you're like either like an hourly rate or just the amount of work that you do isn't really that great or greatly paying off, right?
Yeah.
And again, so whether you're like a fractional, let's say CMO, right? you're best in marketing. If you're fractional CFO, you're best in finances and so on. You, as an expert, you ideally want to do that thing and nothing else because you are an expert in that, right?
True.
And as well, okay, so I consider myself an expert in a technology, and I really want to do things in technology. I don't want to do that much marketing. I don't want to do that much sales. And well, after these 8 to 9 months, I understood, like, you know what? I'm kind of tired on doing the sales process and everything. I will find myself something that I can fully dedicate myself to in the engineering space. However, and this is just like a side note to anyone that is watching our podcast. Like, if you want, you can still contact me on LinkedIn and so on, and I can consult you absolutely for free, 1-2 hours. We can, chat. We can have a cup of coffee or something. I'm not going to be your fractional CTO or something, but I'm very, very happy to help you in your startup world, in your idea, and etc. So I'm happy to share my knowledge and basically give back to the community.
Yeah, that's very admirable. That's very admirable. Yeah. So you know where to find Laimonas. On LinkedIn, you said, right? That's your preferred
mostly
method.
LinkedIn. Yeah, mostly LinkedIn.
Cool. Yeah. So that's what's, the kind of the benefits and downsides of the realities of the fractional CTO. But that's just one of the aspects of working within the startup world as a whole. And the startup world as a whole is also a very particular world with its own type of challenge and with its own type of mindset that is required to survive with it. And as far as I understand, you've worked with successful startups over your career before you became a fractional CTO, and you're probably going to continue doing it from here on out. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Any AI startups that are out there that are maybe beyond the hype, or maybe, aside from the AI stuff, because we've talked about AI so much on this show so far.
Yeah.
I'm not against it. I've said it numerous times already. I am more of a, an optimist when it comes to technologies, but, it's so much. The hype cycle is at its peak, so AI is everywhere.
Agree.
So what's beyond that? What's beyond the hype? Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, so let me give you a little bit of perspective. I've been building AI-based products before the AI was cool. Let's say it like that. I've started building AI products back in somewhere like 2014, 2015. And actually my very first production-based product was chatbot. Exactly like ChatGPT. Obviously, I didn't train the large language models or anything. It was a little bit more basic, but it was a chatbot for Lithuanian language. And it was especially difficult to create a chatbot that is not non-English, because with Lithuania you have these random word mutations. In English language you don't have in the house, on the house, under the house, over the house. House is always the house. Yeah. However, in Lithuanian language, namas, name, namui, the end of the word always changes. And how computers understand those words, they understand them differently. So they think that it's a different word. So I had to, create even different libraries just for Lithuanian language, just to work. But anyways, I've worked in startups where we had very interesting computer vision problems, like face detection, face recognition, face similarity matching, face liveness detection, seeing whether the face is real or photoshopped, and then trying to determine just from the camera, right, itself. Obviously, passport detection, identity card detection, using OCR, extracting all the information. In other startup, there was also this voice chatbot, again, where you would have a normal conversation just by calling a phone number. And all of this was before the very convenient, these large language models era. And I have this kind of now perspective, what the world looked like before LLMs before the ChatGPT and how now everything looks like after ChatGPT. And really the change is very, very different. Before that, AI was really more into data science, into machine learning, into actually trying out different algorithms, building your AI models and deploying and hosting your AI models and everything like that. I'm not saying this is gone. This is definitely still true, but everyone is shifting towards a more convenient approach. And this is why ChatGPT became so popular, because it is extremely convenient, right? It's like a black box. You send text in, you get a text back. In programmatic terms speaking, you just send an HTTP request to some remote service, you get HTTP response back, and then that's it, right? It's all the complexities are gone, right? There's no longer data science, no longer machine learning, nothing. And this is where you can implement those things all over your product, right? You can go from non-AI to AI product in, I don't know, a couple of hours, right? You can just bake in features, slap now AI on top of your product and call it a day, right? So the landscape is totally different now, and what I'm seeing right now, and maybe the hype is a little bit maybe fading away, but anyways, it's still very up there where startups would dedicate their whole business on building something like on top of AI, and there are very good examples like, do you know Rabbit M1?
No.
Or some AI pin?
No. Just
So these are like
explain them.
So these are like very small gadgets that they are supposed to embody the AI itself. So you can talk with that gadget. It's like Siri or whatever, but it's like the gadget and can only do conversations, maybe then see the world and tell you what does it see, and so on and so forth. But all of these products failed because what we now understood as the whole industry, that AI is not a product, AI is a feature, AI is a tool. So what I think like at least the very early AI-based startups got it wrong is that they built AI as a solution, right? As a product first. And what we understood now is that actually you have to have a very solid business idea, right? And in order to have a competitive advantage, this is where you would add such a solution, such a tool as AI, just to have everything more streamlined, et cetera, like competitive advantages, as I said. But still, the idea is that AI is just, a tool, not a solution by itself. So I think this is where we're heading with the AI startups.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, that complexity is not gone, but it's hidden a lot of the time, and anything and everything nowadays is called AI. Just kind of, like you said, slap a sticker on it, and now we're AI. And a lot of those startups are, what are called GPT wrappers, basically.
Some of them are.
Yeah, and a lot of them succeed still. And I do agree with you that the hype starts to die down a little bit. It feels like, again, it's very hard to judge until you're past that juncture, past that level. Of course,
it is.
Maybe we're still just going up, and we just get a small bump, and then it's going to fly into the stratosphere very easily. I don't know. Yeah. But at least from the startup world, from what I've seen in communities like Leadban or in more international like funds, there seems to be more due diligence as to, where does the business come from? Show me the money, basically, is the approach. Absolutely. Where it was much easier just a few months even ago to generate interest and hype in the product just by saying that, we are an AI solution to this particular niche problem. And as an investor, an amateur one, and myself, I saw those products myself, and I was, wow, like this is a product that solves some niche thing in like logistics. What do I know about logistics? Well, I like it when Amazon brings me stuff, and I like when I have a plane from here to London and from here to Singapore and from here to anywhere else. That's where my knowledge of logistics basically ends. So like, and they are talking about very, very specific stuff. So as a layman, I don't really understand the technology and I don't really understand the niche, and it sounds very convincing. But there have been so many over the years and over the months, probably more appropriate, that, you know, okay, so many solutions, all of them AI, very wonderful. So where's the money? Show me real clients that are willing to pay for it. Show me the business model where you're not spending like 98% of your budget just for API calls to OpenAI and that's it. Where you're actually creating some value along the way. And that I feel is a challenge for many startups that are starting out right now. What do you think? Is that how things are, or am I just completely wrong in my assessment?
No, I have to somewhat agree with you what you said. I think there is this article published by Sequoia, one of the biggest VCs.
Yeah,
it was published like 3 or 4 months ago. Trying to recall that, and it basically said the amount of money that flooded into AI-based solutions now require at least like 500 or 600 additional $1 billion of revenue in those companies, right? In order for this AI investment to pay off, right? Okay. So like throughout those companies, 600 billion of additional, just not just revenue, but additional revenue on top of what they're making is quite a high number. Again, it's very hard to judge whether it's achievable or not. It looks not achievable to be honest, but anyways, we'll see. Yeah, but definitely there is a gap between the profitability of the company and the investments into AI solutions. And I'm not just talking about startups. I'm talking also about like Google, Meta, Microsoft, etc. They are all like at the frontier of AI expansion, because only the biggest companies can throw tens or hundreds of millions into training those large language models in the very first place, right? Yeah. But anyways, there is still this very noticeable gap between the investments and the revenue, and the time will simply show whether it's paying off or not. Currently, everyone is still very bullish, right? They're very optimistic. We can see an S&P 500 index. It's still quite confidently grows up. Even the interest rates are at the peak. Yes, they are now a little bit dropping off, but still like the interest rates are high, and the S&P 500 still goes up, and it kind of shows how positively everyone is thinking, right? Everyone have this, I would say like a kind of wishful thinking, right? that everything is going to be fine. And I think the market correction will happen at some place. There is also this another very interesting thing about S&P 500, because despite technology, I'm really into finances as well. I'm really interested in investing as an S&P 500 index, and the economics of the world. And now when you look at the S&P 500 index, it consists of obviously 500 United States companies, right?
Sure.
But the interesting thing is that about now between 30 and 35% of the whole portfolio is comprised of these 7 main tech giants like Microsoft, Meta, Tesla, Amazon, Apple, Nvidia, of course. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Nvidia number 1, I think this now.
Yes.
Yeah. So the last time that we had this concentration in one industry was back in 2000s. Do you remember what happened in 2000s?
Yeah, some .coms made a bubble, and then And then tech became not very sexy for a couple of years.
Exactly.
At the very least.
Exactly. So back in 2000s, S&P 500 index also was comprised around like 30 to 35% of tech stocks, and then it crashed, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like there are similarities between this AI hype and the internet hype. And I think that like AI as a technology is as influential and as revolutionary as internet itself. But I think both of these technologies are like so revolutionary that they still create these ripple effects, these bubble effects. And as internet technology created a bubble, it crashed, but then it bounced back. I think something will happen similar to AI, where it created the bubble, it will crash, but it will bounce back up because, well, let's be honest, AI is a very good technology.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's why I'm always optimistic when we talk about AI on this show and outside of this show.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I do have, a myriad of ideas and a myriad of theoretical applications of where and why and how the actual benefits can be made through AI. But those need to be tested, those need to be implemented, those need to be done. The kind of time needs to just have passed before we're ready to say that, it actually works. And just due to the nature of how tech works, we just like our hype cycles. We always need the next shiny toy, and we always like telling the whole world that, this is the one, this is the next, like you said, the next internet. Is it true? Well, who knows? It has the potential at the very least.
Absolutely,
I agree with that. But until we're done that, it's very hard to say, because the same could be said about the internet in the year 2000. What could it realistically do? A fraction of what it does now, right? Nobody could have imagined that all of our modern infrastructure will be basically built upon it, where, two major countries having a war very not far from here will be using the internet as the main kind of
exactly
driving force behind that. It was unimaginable, and that was just 25 years ago. What will happen in like 10 years with AI being implemented? Hard to say, but we'll see.
You can see even now that AI is being weaponized, right?
Yes.
It's not just internet. It's like AI is already being fully weaponized. We see that impersonations, deepfakes of presidents, right, giving fake speeches and etc. and doing this crazy stuff. Even the like LLM services themselves being employed, connected to Twitter and other social platforms to spread, these messages and propaganda and everything. Like AI is fully weaponized right now. Fully.
Yes. And Europe is pushing its regulation a little bit to try and take control of the technology itself. And there's going to be an AI Act, or it's already out. I don't honestly know, but it's in progress definitely until everybody has committed to it.
Yeah.
So at least we have that, but government is usually very behind technology.
As always.
As always. But it has gotten better, I feel like.
Yes.
It's faster than adopting to the internet. But whether it will succeed or not,
we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. So coming back then to the idea of startups generally, I feel like a lot of them before the hype, like you said, were very much about data science, data models, particular amounts of data that you have access to, that you can build something unique upon it. And I feel like that's coming back a little bit, where, we now know that the AI hype exists, and then we have some sources of data that we can utilize, maybe through AI, maybe not, maybe just by building a particular mathematical model and making predictions based on that model. Hell, even maybe just visualizing particular things in an already existing business can reduce waste significantly, or can open up new revenue streams, and can do a lot. So talking about that data, and I'm guessing you've had your fair share of working with those types of data. What kind of advice can you give to those startups that are now working on those, hard projects, where you actually have some data models that you need to build, where you actually have a technology that you need to either implement or, iterate on, or even create on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a very nice example at Watergraph, what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Right, we are data analytics, specifically platform in a marketing performance monitoring. Right, so we're dealing with large amounts of data, like terabytes and terabytes and terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data. Right. The most basic approach is to aggregate the data, spit it out for the client, and say, yeah, do whatever you want with that data. We're more than that, and what we're trying also to do is So what we're going to do is we're going to aggregate the data. We're going to analyze the data, maybe find some of the insights, anomaly detection. All of these things, like grouping, like parameter grouping, multidimensional grouping. And then, since the output of all these algorithms is still some kind of like technical, what we would combine with large language models to further crunch down the outputs of those statistical models and present in a human readable, human understandable format, right? And I think this is what other startups are doing this as well, especially like data insights, data analytics, data driven startups. They realized the power that's actually like large language models can quite well interpret numbers and understand them. Obviously, you're not going to give him a terabyte size table. You still need to crunch those numbers, right? But once those numbers are already crunched and they have some sort of like mathematical output, then you can give to this new AI approach, which will interpret those numbers and give you something more like a story behind it, not just a soulless number, right? So I think this is like the approach that startups are taking right now, and we're doing this at Watergraph as well.
Well, good luck to you on that journey, because nowadays the environment is quite competitive for any startup, successful one, unsuccessful one. You always live until the last round, till the next round, from the last till the next. And you've been on that journey with startups growing from nothing then to scaling. Aside from just the specifics of AI and data, generally speaking, what would you say, to those founders that are just starting out? What are the most important maybe challenges along the way that await them that they need to tackle that are maybe not as obvious as, you need to survive and you need some money to do that?
Focus on business.
Yeah, focus on business. Bring money in and everything will be fine.
For founders that are just starting out, and actually even like back in like when I was fractional CTO, I consulted one like very early stage startup. There were two new founders that haven't done this before, and they wanted to go the entrepreneurship path.
Okay.
So I think one of the main things to understand and to accept that the idea that you have is wrong in the very beginning. Your vision, sorry, it sucks. Right off the bat, it's not good, right? And you don't have to, take that idea like it's like your child or something, but you need to accept it, and you need to try and build an MVP for your idea. Understand that it failed, because most likely it's going to fail, right? And you need to get feedback from a couple of customers or from the like market itself or your friends, like whoever you can get feedback from, do it, right?
Yeah.
Then adjust your product against that feedback, rinse and repeat. And that's how you like eventually end up with this magical product market fit, right? Because like initially, like you're going to fail, but that's the part of the journey, right? You need to Get the feedback, adjust your product, get the feedback, adjust your product, get the feedback, adjust your product. And eventually you will find something that sticks, something that gets traction. And then you will know that you can, double down on that or something. So this is one of the main things I would like tell for any early startup founder, like, your idea is bad, accept it and be okay with it.
Yeah, that's the very important part that you need to forget.
Yeah.
Don't forget, rather. That's it's a feedback loop, right? You're trying to bring something to the market, and the market will tell you something about that thing that you're trying to bring to it. And a lot of the time, the feedback will be very straightforward, like, it sucks, like you say. But in order to make yourself better, you need to understand what particularly sucks, because some things, suck more, some things suck less. Maybe you have a very wonderful code base that in and of itself is already an asset, and that asset can be utilized in particular ways. Or maybe the other way around, maybe you have no code at all, but you have a very particular niche that you can exploit in a particular manner, and you just need to find the right manner to do that. And it's just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
But you see, the thing about the feedback itself, it's easier said than done, right? Because the feedback that you're looking for usually is that very specifically, like, this thing doesn't work, or this thing is not valuable. I'm not going to use it because it's too expensive, etc., etc. But usually the feedback that you do get is people are not using it. And then go and figure out yourself what you did wrong, where your idea is falling behind, falling short, right? And so on. So that is why it's very, very important to get that feedback that actually tells you something. Yes, if users are not using your platform, your product, it's already some sort of feedback, but it's not enough. You need to dig deeper. You need to contact those ex-customers or current ones to understand, like, how are they using your system, and then why they did not choose it in the very first place, right? You need that kind of, like, granular feedback.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Indeed, it creates kind of a feedback loop between you and the market, where you do something and then the market tells you, maybe that does not work. Or then you iterate and then you try and find a new approach, and so on and so forth. It goes, as long as you have a runway of making those mistakes and you can afford it, you can continue doing it. But then again, I do want to ask, generally speaking, about the mindset and the situation of a founder. You're always, like you said yourself, in a situation where you want a very granular, very complete feedback. You get a very limited, very abstract feedback, and you're always limited in terms of time, and you're always limited in terms of technologies, and you're always limited. So then iterating on your ideas, on your technological approach, on even your tech stack becomes very imperative, because you don't know where the road will lead you. So what would be some technical advice you would give as a fractional CTO or an ex-fractional CTO?
Yeah, of course. So yes, as we talk about this feedback loop that you really have to have in order to find the product market fit, in ideal scenario, the faster you can do these iteration cycles, the better, right? And it's for every startup, it's all about speed and short iteration cycles. And as you very well mentioned, like, technology can be either a catalyst for your fast iteration cycle, or like vice versa, it can slow you down. And it's very, very important. Actually, it's a job of a technical co-founder or a CTO or a fractional CTO or any other, like, experienced consultant to tell you this. And generally speaking, right, how do you usually comprise technical teams? You usually comprise them into backend, into front end, into QA, into maybe sometimes even mobile, and so on. But for early stage startup, this kind of team is too slow, right? I mean, it worked probably like 5 years ago, and it probably still does kind of work, but it no longer gives you this very competitive advantage or very, very fast iteration cycles. What gives is actually full stack frameworks and full stack technologies. Like why the Vercel and Next.js are so popular, because they encompass this all-in-one solution where you have the infrastructure, the front end, the back end in one code base, and you're like good to go. I'm not saying that I'm a fan of Vercel or Next.js. Like Vercel is super expensive and it runs on serverless Lambda functions. And the Next.js library by itself is kind of a lock-in with Vercel, because like if you want to unlock all of the benefits of these technologies, they have to work together. And if you want to deploy it somewhere else, like it starts becoming like, but there are like other technologies. I recently started playing with Remix. It's another React-based full stack framework which allows you to build front-end and back-end basically in the same file. Like one function is for the front end, one function is for the back end.
Oh, wow.
And it sounds messy.
It does.
I agree.
I'm not a technical person. To me, it sounds like, okay, can that even be done? So how does that work?
It can. And it sounds very messy, but actually, like if you are having some like design principles and you're not breaking those design principles, you can have very, very beautiful system. And the beauty of this, let's say, using Remix, then using Vercel as an infrastructure, and then I don't know, like deploying like Postgres database to AWS, whatever. Like this, with this stack, a single full stack developer can probably beat your 5-person team that is like 2 front-end developers, 2 back-end developers, and let's say a QA. And like I would assume that at some places, this single guy would beat 5 people just because there is no communication overhead. There are no knowledge gaps between the front end and the back end. There is no knowledge gap like what QA knows, because QA now needs to learn some of the back end stuff, some of the front end stuff, how things work, like all of these communication getting back and forth. No, there's a single person which can deliver a feature single-handedly by himself or by herself. And it's so much faster here, right? And that is why we see these technologies ramping up in popularity, because they reduce these iteration cycles, right? Instead now, for the feature to be implemented within a day, now you can implement probably the same feature within an hour or something, just because like the seamless integration of all of the technologies, well, also AI as well. Obviously, we have to credit the AI and code generation capabilities and etc. But the landscape here is like, if you really want to have short iteration cycles, if you want to be super, super lean, look for generalists instead of specialists. And by generalists, I mean the ones that can deliver full feature by themselves, right? The full stack, instead of specialists, the ones that specialize in front end, the ones that specialize in the back end, because you will save so much time, so many resources having generalists first. And only when you scale up to some degree, like 10, 20, 30, 50 like people, then start already specializing them into like infrastructure engineer, front-end engineer, back-end, QA, but start with generalist first and have those short iteration cycles.
Okay, that makes sense. But also I feel it can create a very uncomfortable situation where you have a lot of risks in the beginning of choosing the correct way forward, like just the general architecture of your product, your service, whatever it is that you are working on. if you make the mistake of investing into the wrong thing, you have to it's a single fail system, basically. You don't have any safeguards, You don't have a very beautiful interface that can live without the backend code base, right? It's all just one thing together, inseparable. And if you are planning to live until you do scale up, you need to consider that in the very beginning. You don't have as much flexibility, as far as I understand. Is that correct?
Yes, you are correct. But my philosophy here is that as a startup, you need to both concentrate on today and also on tomorrow. But you can't fully look only at tomorrow, because if you don't manage your resources well and you don't iterate fast enough and you run out of cash, right? Tomorrow may never even come. So if you're like concentrating on solving only tomorrow's problems and not solving today's problems, tomorrow may never come, right? So my philosophy here is focus on profitability and survival, on the most fundamental things. And once you start having, like, let's say, scalability issues, and you need now to specialize your team more, these are all good problems to have, because it already means that your business is working, you're generating money, you're having clients, and you're having these growth problems. And growth problems are good problems.
That's true. That's true. The problems of when you're just starting out and the problems when you're scaling up are very, very different. And I recently had a conversation with one of the founders that is closer towards the scale-up stage, way past the initial startup phase, like somewhere like, I don't know, Series A, pushing that area of maturity. So for them, it's basically a nostalgia trip when they're looking back at those initial problems. They're like, oh yeah, it was so nice where it was me basically and my computer and the problems of actually developing stuff, looking for more investments, building a business plan, understanding the clients, finding the market fit, and blah, 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 blah. So once you're past that, you have a whole set of very specific problems that relate to growth. That's true. And then you have the luxury of looking back at those problems that you already solved and kind of, yeah, that was fun. That was nostalgic.
Well, at least for the technical teams, it never stops, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you always kind of are solving scalability issues, whether you're like in the very early stages or in the very late stages. The impact that is changing, right? But you're always solving very interesting problems.
Yeah. That uncertainty, I feel, is a part of, the tech DNA again. Just we always live in some amount of uncertainty, even if you are working on a 20-year-old legacy system that does billing for a plant that has been in operation for 50 years. There's still a lot of uncertainty in, okay, what's the next iteration going to bring? We'll be able to, support the security protocols necessary to maintain the databases that we have, and so on and so on and so forth. So there's just so many things that's tech people face every single day, and it's just part of the business, I feel like. So what would your advice be? How do you live with that uncertainty day in, day out?
Come on, you just embrace it and you just live with it. It's part of any startups or tech persons within the startup environment is ultimate uncertainty, right? Because you don't know nothing. You don't know whether you have found a product market fit or not. And how can you build a technology on top? How can you build a technology that can iterate fast enough and then pivot fast enough? Because you can really create a very nice and robust solution, but it's so specialized. So now that if you need to pivot your business idea from being this to that, now actually this code is too rigid to move it somehow, right? And then you maybe need a lot of refactoring and so on. So you have to bake this business uncertainty into the code itself. As a mature IT leader or mature software developer within startups, you're quite aware of this. And when you're designing some sort of solution or designing a code base or architecture, infrastructure, doesn't really matter. You're baking some uncertainties into your code where it could go this or that way if required, right? You don't go all into making one very, very rigid solution. You're making it flexible for the future possibilities, right? So this is how you like dealing with this. Like code is a very good reflection of the business itself and the uncertainties of the business.
True. I also feel that the role of mentorship is an important one, since when you face an uncertainty, especially as a younger founder, both technologically and in business, it is always nice to have somebody who has been down that road and can see a few steps more ahead than you can. And they can just come in with some of your uncertainties and say, hey, relax. That does not matter right now. Just don't focus on that. Just forget about it. It will just turn itself out. Don't stress about it. Now, the other thing that you're thinking about now, that is something that you should be focusing on.
Yeah.
What do you think? Does that play a role, or is that just muddies your vision where you're like, oh my God, one more guy I need to be worried about? Why?
No. I think you got it very right. And that's actually one of the reasons why I consider the fractional CTO role in the very beginning. It resonated with me very much because I already went through that road of failed projects, succeeded projects, and the pains of scaling, the pains of choosing incorrect technologies and so on. And I said, like, okay, I'm pretty confident that I can consult other early startups with the right decisions, the right focus, the right technologies, etc., etc. And that was like one of my main drivers of actually even becoming the fractional CTO in the very first place. And I think I still very much believe this is very, very important for startups, for the founders to get this advice. Now, the question is, where do you get this mentorship from? Right?
Yeah.
You can Google out many services, right? But the one problem they all share is lack of trust, right? You don't know them, you don't know their quality, etc. But what you do know is your connections, is your friends, your business partners, etc. So I would definitely rely first on the people that I know, that I built connections with throughout my career. And I would ask their advice first. Maybe they could pinpoint to other connections that they have. And that's how I would find, a perfect fit for my, advisory board, for example, right?
Oh, yeah.
Instead of actually then going and Googling and finding fractional people and not trusting them. Like this was one of my struggles as well, to prove that like you can trust me, I will deliver you value and so on. Like all these sales calls for me were, a real struggle, right? Because you need to trust, especially like an executive role, right?
Yes. That's a good point that you bring up, that at the end of the day, don't forget about the human stuff. Don't forget about the human connection, that there are people that you have worked with that know you and you know them, that you can rely on them to at least make an introduction to somewhere. You don't know until you go and ask, and you're not left on your own with all of the problems in the world on your shoulders, and that's it. Go out, reach out, ask, and you will be surprised how much stuff you may find out on the other end.
By the way, this exactly applies to fundraising as well.
True.
Exactly the same thing, because when you are fundraising, you're just sending pitch decks right and left, trying to get as many meetings as possible. And again, like with product market fit, exactly the same thing. You're trying to get feedback from VCs, adjust your business model, adjust your slides, and try it again. And exactly the same way works, where you finally find some VC or VCs that actually say, you know what, like this is legit stuff. We really like it, but we're not operating in this industry. Therefore, we're going to reference you or pinpoint you to another VC. We're going to introduce you. And this is where you already level up into the second stage of fundraising, where now you gain this trust of other VCs a little bit more, because you're not coming out of the blue. you're being referenced by another VC, and this is how you can also like gain trust in the VC world better.
True. I completely agree with that, and that's always the best way to do it. You don't always have that way. It's a limited resource. You don't always can scale it up. The problems come with scaling, but like you said, the scaling problems are good problems. Once you've over that hump, once you have a couple of VC friends that believe in you and trust in you, that's fine. You'll find the other ones after that. But the first ones are very important. And the same applies to business development, to sales as well. That's basically what sales is. You find people and you meet them and then you expand your business. So for example, a VC might have invested in a company 10 years ago that is now a large corporation. And that large corporation may need the type of service that you provide or your product that they can implement into them. And then once you're selling, you're coming in again with a recommendation from that person that invested in them when they were yay big. And
exactly.
You're immediately a trustworthy person in that regard. And even if your product is not perfect, but that level of trust can win out.
Exactly. So absolutely agree.
round and round it goes into one closed ecosystem. And now it revolves around AI for some reason. We'll find our next hype, I think, very soon. So what do you think? What's going to replace AI? What's going to be the hypey thing?
The next hype. Well, people speculate that it might be augmented or virtual reality, right?
That's been on the back burner for years, I feel like. But Meta has made a nice push, right? But
yeah, they did. But I still feel that we are quite limited, like technology-wise. Still, like putting some huge goggles on your face still feels weird, right? Unless we can shrink technology to these glasses, it's going to be a very tough sell for augmented or virtual reality. But I think this is one of the candidates. I'm definitely betting against crypto.
As Bitcoin hit its peak.
Yeah, I'm still betting against it. Like I would short it if I could or something. I don't think it's a very useful technology. Like by all means, I don't like it and don't respect the technology in any case.
Okay, now you will be regretting that you've actually shared the contact information. And people will know where to find you. You'll have very many angry Bitcoin evangelists and telling you how blockchain can solve all the world problems.
Yeah, I had a couple of interested customers in my fractional CTO services where they were building solutions on top of blockchain, but I just straight up rejected them as potential customers, saying, sorry, I'm not working with crypto. Like, I don't believe it. I'm not going down that rabbit hole.
Was it before or after they proposed to pay you in crypto?
Yeah, that's another thing that like actually all of them want to pay in crypto. Not in real money. That's another problem.
That's true. And I've been working in that space for a while. Not a fan at all. Can't say that I'm, have as a strong opinion about it as you are, but I am kind of, it lives somewhere over there. It's not touching me. I'm not touching it.
It's another world.
Yeah, it's another world. But once you interact with people from that world, you're very kind of, not
like pulled in.
Pulled in, yeah, that's a nice word. Yeah. I wanted to say like seduced, but not seduced, but pulled in. You're kind of, you just start understanding the lingo. You make a few transactions, you have a wallet, and then it just kind of,
and everything is shiny and colorful. Those tokens are very nice looking, right? And then you feel like collector of like virtual assets.
And then you see that the value of theirs raises much faster than any of your other assets, and you're like, maybe it makes sense.
Maybe I should go all in.
Yeah, but it's never been me. Some people, sure, but never for me. Well, then I guess that's about it. I guess we don't really have anything else on the table. Nothing comes to mind aside from what you said. VR could be a thing. The limitations of its technologies are very evident. But the same could be said about LLMs very, very recently, right? Until you can keep at least yay amount of context within you, and you can actually have a conversation that resembles humanity within a user, nobody's going to use you. And people became aware of ChatGPT at version 3.5.
Yeah,
at
when
1.0.
it became very consumer-friendly product.
Yes,
It's all about convenience, always.
Yes. So VR is still not at that level of convenience, but you release just one headset that does it, and then
the industry would explode probably.
yeah, it will explode even more, I think, than with AI. But yeah,
We'll see. Yeah.
We will see. We will see. For now, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for listening to us. As always, you know what to do: like, share, subscribe us on YouTube. If you find us anywhere else, like on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, do that as well. We might be coming to Blue Sky as well. I don't know. I haven't used it just yet, but it's getting hypey, so why not? Maybe Blue Skype is the next hype. Who knows?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like it has the potential. It has it. But yeah, thank you very much. See you next time.